listening to Kingston Community Radio on WGHQ Kingston. On your radio at 920 AM and 92.5 FM. And also online at mykcr.org.
Central Hudson reminds you, when you're doing yard work, safety matters. If you use a ladder, be aware of overhead electric lines, including the service wire that runs to your house. Even wooden ladders can conduct electricity with dangerous results. And be very careful if there are electric lines above or near a swimming pool, and you're working with skimmers, brooms, or other long-handled tools. Central Hudson wishes you a safe summer.
Long ago, you wouldn't think of galloping on a horse while doing calligraphy, and you wouldn't have attempted to ride your bike while typing a letter. Yet you think you can safely operate a multi-ton vehicle while texting? Behind the wheel is no place to multitask. If you want to BRB, drive now and text later. Lives depend on it.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Hi, my name is Jackie Levezzo. I'm from Lake Katrine, and I support Kingston Community Radio because it is an invaluable resource to the community and its residents.
This portion of Kingston Community Radio is brought to you by Ulster Savings Bank. Visit their newest branch, conveniently located at the Ulster Commons Plaza in Lake Katrine. Experience the difference that local community banking offers with the convenience of another great location, easy access, plenty of parking, and a 24-hour ATM. Ulster Savings Bank, invested in community, invested in you. Member FDIC.
All right, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
All Kingston Community Radio fans. Those of you able to get up this early with us, we're happy to see you and talk to you. This is a call-in. We're going to do call-ins today. So the number is 331-9255. You're here with Hugh Reynolds, Mario Catalano, and we've got a couple of guests today. So we're going to have some fun. So the second hour of the show, we're going to talk garbage with the folks from the RRA. We like to know a little bit about where they intend to take our garbage when the landfill closes, what they're doing, what kind of plans they have, if any, and when they're going to get going. So we're going to have an interesting conversation with those folks, and of course then there's some other issues that are going on with the operation. So we'll hope to cover a whole broad range of subjects that every one of us should be interested in, because we don't get rid of this garbage, it's going to be piled up in the streets. The second, earlier at 7:30, we have a guest who is writing. He's a professor from SUNY Albany, and he's writing a book about urban renewal, and Kingston is a big part of it. So
comparing Kingston and Newburgh.
Comparing Kingston and Newburgh's urban renewal efforts, and so we want to get the scoop on what was happening and how that transpired. And it isn't very often that Kingston gets a nice piece of literature about how we do things and what we do. But before that, we've got the first half hour to cover some territory, you. So the one thing that you mentioned this morning, and I think is very exciting, is our major leaguer.
Our major leaguer, Zach Short, is pounding the ball. I think Mario had 2 home runs in the last 2 days.
Yes, he's up to 5 home runs already.
And he's got more home runs than the Yankee left fielder, I believe.
Probably, yeah. Maybe we can get him to the Yankees. Who knows? But he's short since the All-Star break. He has started every day at shortstop.
Yeah,
he's been the everyday shortstop, and that's incredible.
It is. The notion that a 190 hitter, which he was, I think he's probably hitting 200. The standards have been this is no aspersion on Zach Short, but to make it in the majors, I guess you only have to hit about 190 these days. But this kid has some pop, which is not required for a shortstop. Shortstop is his primary purpose, like a catcher, is defense, and he's also they rate him very highly as a defensive shortstop.
Yeah, and here's what's interesting, and I believe the last 30 games, Detroit has the best record in baseball.
They are surging.
They're like 20-10, some crazy number, and he's a part of it because he's been there for a few weeks now.
Yeah, he was down with some injury for a while. Then he had a slump. He was hitting about 270 when he first came up, and then he got under 190. But he has obviously bounced back, and that's a good sign because a kid he's kind of a middle-aged ball player
26.
now. 26.
Yeah.
But a kid comes up, or a ball player comes up, and from the minors, and it's a different level. Obviously, it's a lot tougher. And then he has problems, and some guys get down on themselves, and they don't bounce back. This guy has bounced back, and he's in a good situation. Detroit was a struggling ball club before this. They were well under 500. Their superstar Cabrera is just at the end of his career, and he's not playing anywhere near that level. But now they're on a surge, so that's good news for us Kingstonians who are sometimes called Kingstonites.
Yeah,
there's a new name for Kingstonians.
We take a lot of pride in our baseball around here.
Yes, we do.
From the Little League to the American Legion to this is a baseball town. No question about it.
Hey, you mentioned the American Legion baseball team. Our senior boys are playing for a state title on Saturday.
Oh, no kidding! Where?
In Saugerties.
Oh, wow! So Cantine?
Yeah, Cantine. The two teams merged after a long tradition of Legion baseball, and they're I believe they're the Kingston Saugerties.
Oh,
something.
Okay.
And anyway, that's of note. It's at 7 o'clock.
Some good ball.
Oh yeah, and they're kind of short-handed. They normally carry 18 or 19 players, and they've got 14.
Oh wow!
So to get this far, anyway, go on.
Yeah, with this. Okay, and then I'm wondering if you'll be kind enough to share with the listening audience the saga of your phone call from the golf historian. I think that's even just as exciting to me as to know.
Well, we're golfers, right?
Yeah.
Were you ever a member of Twaskill?
No.
No.
The only club I've ever belonged to was Woolwick.
Yeah. Twaskill was the only club that would accept me. I was a member of their during their 100th anniversary celebration in '02, and a writer from Atlanta. The web is amazing; they can find anybody.
Oh yeah, sure.
He contacted me this week and told me that he was writing a history of golf course. This guy's specialty is golf course design.
Okay.
And he's writing a history of golf course design. And one of the pioneers, as they call him, is a man named W.H. Tillinghast.
Tillinghast. Yeah.
Who in the early part of the 20th century designed hundreds of dozens, if not scores, if not hundreds of golf courses.
Yeah.
It was a real boom in golf, particularly after the 1913 U.S. Open, where an American won it for the first time. Golf was dominated by Britain in those days. Tillinghast, according to this article, which I'll be reporting on, Tillinghast designed Twaskill, which is like having
like essentially royalty.
Right, yeah, it's a word for it. Royalty, yeah.
Yeah, golf royalty, designing, and wasn't that one of his early courses?
Yeah, it was either it was within the first 2 or 3, according to the article. It might have been the first, very early in his career. So in a sense, he began to establish his reputation right here in Kingston. And golf in Kingston, according to this article, goes back a long, long way to the 1870s, where they were playing golf in Kingston. One of the things I learned about in this article, as I was a member, I was constantly griping about how punitive the golf course was. It's short, no relation to Zach Short. It's a short course, but it's narrow, and there's a vicious rough and trees and water and a lot of bad places to get to, and. There's actually a class of golf courses, 9-hole golf courses all over the country, that are laid out the lay of the land. They're not like, they don't move a lot of dirt around these places. They play
whatever the natural
terrain
is.
Jack Nicklaus is a great advocate of that type of philosophy, and they're literally called they're small, short 9-hole golf courses with tiny, what they call postage stamp greens.
Greens, yeah.
And they're literally called, I didn't know this, Mario, they're literally called penal courses. I know, I didn't want to get you in the middle of drinking penal courses. And they can penalize an errant shot.
Wow.
So that's a great connection to our town.
And then tying that into the original, Zach Short's dad was the golf pro at Woolwich.
At Woolwich, yes.
Yeah, Wayne.
And if we go back another generation, Zach Short's grandfather was a sports editor and a managing editor of the Daily Freeman, Eddie Palladino.
Wow.
And Eddie followed every game those two boys played, and it was basketball or baseball.
He was a good basketball player too.
Excellent.
Correctly.
He was an all-star.
3-point shot.
Yeah, deadly. So was his brother. When those guys put him up, they went in. So that's very interesting news, I think. For back when they did the history of Twaffskill, they had a great deal of difficulty finding records, and a lot of it was just written on the back of bar tabs, I think. Twaffskill had his reputation for being a kind of.
So he's writing this history, and he contacted you for.
As a former member, for any information I might have, and we'll talk with each other next week.
Great, that's great. So there are a couple of interesting and exciting developments.
Mm-hmm.
How about the IDA? Let's get into some politics. We're here for politics.
Now we have these guys coming over here, right?
No, we have RRA coming.
Darn it, IDA.
The IDA pulling the plug on Golden Hill. I thought that, I'm not, quite honestly, I'm not sure if they can still do that, but this is going to be interesting. They seem to be pretty confident that they could pull the plug on these dudes.
Well, the idea,
so before we get into that, we do have a caller.
Okay,
so,
hey.
Good morning, caller.
Hi, good morning. It's Brian Waltman calling. How you gentlemen doing this today?
Hang on a second. We got to turn up your volume.
Hi, good morning. It's Brian Waltman calling. Just you to tie everything up in a nice bow for you. Zach Short now is a member of Twaffskill.
No kidding. I didn't know that, Brian.
He played there all last summer because obviously he was home with the COVID. He was with the Cubs. Then he was traded to the Tigers organization. And for most of the summer, he was at Twaffskill last year.
What kind of player is he? Some good athletes are lousy golfers.
No, he's a very good player. Let's put it this way. You're familiar with the course, the 9th hole. I was in a group with him on a Saturday morning last year, and I had about 180 yards into the hole for my second shot.
Nice drive.
Yeah, well, it was pretty good. Yeah. But he only had 50 yards left.
He outdrove you by 130 yards?
Yes. But here's the funny story about golf. When we each putted out, we each walked off with a 4.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself as we walked back to the first tee was there's many paths to a 4.
Yes, there are. No question
But
about
no,
that.
he's quite a good player. A fine young man too. I really only met him last summer when he was playing. He got into our group quite a bit, and he's a fine young man. It's just joy and fun to watch his progress.
You know, Brian, you probably know that, as we mentioned, that his father was the golf pro at Wiltwick. So
Yes.
I presume this young man had some pretty good fundamentals growing
Yes,
up.
he does. And his Wayne is now a member of Twaffskill as well. So we have the whole family there. We're just glad.
Well,
to
I
have
hope
him.
Twaffskill votes for you.
Well, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know if they live in the district. But I'll tell you what, this A.W. Tillinghast, just to maybe let the listeners know the caliber of courses he's done.
Yeah.
He designed both courses at Wingfoot, the East and West course. The West course obviously is where they played the U.S. Open last year. Quaker Ridge is another course he designed, a public course, Bethpage Black. And Baltusrol in New Jersey. So this is a renowned golf course architect, and I've been asked to work on a committee of club members to focus on this project that you were speaking of earlier, because this could be quite something else if it all pans out.
Twaffskill on the map.
Yeah, Tillinghast has designed numerous golf courses where majors were played on.
Yes, he has.
He is the gold standard.
Yes, he and Donald Ross are right at the and
him and Ross,
Mackenzie were right the golden era of golf course architecture. They just were. It's phenomenal news if it actually pans out. I'm optimistic that it's going to. But anyway, I'll let you guys get back to your discussion. I just wanted to tie up.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Brian.
Yeah,
That's
that was
good.
great.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, Brian.
Bye.
So you
Yes.
time now to figure out exactly what went on with this IDA thing. So evidently, from the way I understand the story, Ulster County sold Golden Hill
213
in 2013, and then Golden Hill was purchased at some time after that from the original group.
Okay, so these guys are...
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then sold to an investment group out of Brooklyn or New York City or something. And the investment group came to the IDA for all of the appropriate or inappropriate tax breaks, sales tax, mortgage tax. They save money on everything, and and then did a pilot, etc. And then proceeded to, instead of increase jobs, which the job of the IDA is to
create
produce
jobs
and create
Produce,
additional jobs, they essentially, or this rumor has it, I don't want to, I have,
Well, it's according to published reports with direct quotes. So
they cut the staff from 330 to 210 or something.
Yeah, by a third.
By about a third, and I think so. The IDA is now backtracking, which is appropriate, to find out if these folks who've gotten all these tax breaks are doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, it's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
We give you a tax break, but this is what you have to do in exchange, and they can't even get a call back. So
from Saul.
Yeah, from Saul. So evidently they're prepared to pull the plug. And my question is, and this is going to obviously wind up in court, because these folks sound like pros. They're not going to roll over and play dead to the IDA, but this is probably going to wind up in court with them saying that a deal's a deal or whatever, and the IDA saying, no, we have all these clawback provisions and you owe us a ton of money. And now I'm presuming that money goes to the school district and to the city and the county or whatever.
It's tax money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be. I think this is going to be interesting. This is only from what I can tell, the first round of probably a 15-round championship fight. You know, we're in round one here, where they're filling each other out and throwing a couple of jabs.
Well, I would think the ultimate threat is for these developers, these owners, to shut the place down. And there's 200 or so patients in that building. And
yeah, I don't think they're going to walk away from the cash flow. These things are, most of these are cash cows. They produce a lot of revenue, and of course, here the way these nursing homes work is most of these folks are covered by Medicaid.
Almost entirely in this one.
And Medicaid pays X number of dollars a day per patient, whether you have 3 nurses for that patient or 1 nurse for that patient. So what they, what the business people who are now running these operations try to do is keep the smallest number of staff, keep their expenses to the bare minimum because they can't charge anymore. So what they do is they back out. They say, all right, this is how much revenue we're going to get, and we spend as little as possible, and we get to keep the rest.
It's kind of like the Daily Freeman. I think we should regress a bit about this infirmary deal. Sold in 2013 for, I believe, $11 million, which in effect is the county surplus, and that's been rolled over ever since. It's kind of a floating surplus.
Yeah. Okay.
There
was a lot of talk then that
and there was
the money.
Yeah, there was also talk. There was also talk then that why can't the county do some of the things that create some of the efficiencies, not necessarily laying off people, but running a more efficient operation than they had, and at least break even. That's the county doesn't have to make tons of money on this thing, and then the first developers, I believe, bought it. The second group, this group, refinanced it for something like $30 million. So these bankers, bankers don't hand money out. They're not like government. These are gimlet-eyed, bottom line people. And if they believe, if they said that building was worth buildings were worth $30 million or so roughly 3 times what the county sold it for, I think you might conclude the county gave it away. With the IDA paying all the taxes. Or forgiving all the taxes.
Yeah, I mean, to tie up this whole conversation together, there's this term inside baseball, and I'm not sure exactly what happened when we sold this thing, but either the county got some bad advice on the value, or the folks who were responsible for selling it were not astute enough to realize the full value, or the county was unwilling to do what it had to do to create value, because a lot of times you're in a situation and there are nursing home consultants.
Sure.
There are. We probably, if we wanted to continue to run it, could have brought in
some experts,
or turned the management over to professionals and paid.
There were a lot of other options.
A management company to run the thing, and again, part of the problem, and by way of full disclosure, when I was on the legislature, that was my committee. I ran the infirmary.
Now, Catalano's not exaggerating here, but which he does occasionally. Back before the executive, although we had and before the county administrator.
Correct.
The legislators who were chairs of respective committees, and in Mario's case, the infirmary. I think you spoke to this in one of our walks, that there was a lot of your time taken up essentially overseeing this operation.
I'll tell you how and this again, this was probably part of the problem, but I would get phone calls where the somebody at the infirmary would say they didn't pick up the garbage. Can you get in touch with the company? The refuse hauler? And I'm like, this was like
not my job.
Well, I mean, I was under the impression that we were the oversight and that, I was call the
administrator.
Yeah. And, during my term, we did dismiss the administrator. But one of the things that I found out about the infirmary, and which ultimately led to its demise and sale, was the fact that there were so many politically connected people working there.
And patients.
I don't want to mention any names, but when there was a politician who, a couple of them that were known to, if you wanted to get one of your relatives in the infirmary, you either called this guy or that guy. One was a Republican, one was a Democrat. Both of them elected officials whose specialty was
getting people. It was a long line, unless you.
Oh yeah.
Right till the very.
Cut that line.
Yeah, right to the very end of a person's life, you had to know somebody, right to the end of your life.
Oh yeah, because that was another pain in the neck for me, because I would find notes on my desk. And, we'd go to a legislator meeting, and there would be a little envelope, and there'd be a note in there. And I would say, listen, my uncle's pretty sick. I need to get him in the infirmary. And, I had to take care of it. Of course, these were my fellow legislators who were moving people through the system. So if you were an average Joe, you were online.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you didn't live long enough to get to the front of the line. So, yeah, the infirmary was an interesting institution because it served many purposes. We were completely overstaffed.
Yes.
And I told you the story of one of the legislators came to me and told me that he heard rumors that they were stealing, the employees were stealing meat from the infirmary. They were taking the good cuts and they were leaving the hamburger behind for the. So I went to, at the time it was Sheriff LaPaglia. I went to LaPaglia and I said, hey, I don't know, do you have, you got some way to catch these people? And he said, well, the next time there's an opening, let me know and we'll put a deputy in there. So we had an opening in the kitchen for a dishwasher, and one of LaPaglia's people applied for the job, got hired, and we had a sheriff's deputy who was a dishwasher in the infirmary. And it took about 4 or 5 days, and LaPaglia set up a camera outside, and we had a situation where one of the employees was walking out of the kitchen with cases of steak.
Cases,
two cases, if I remember correctly. It was 2 cases of nice steaks. And so now we had an eyewitness, the dishwasher. We had photographic evidence, and so we took it to the county, to the infirmary administrator, who proceeded to fire the individual who had done this. Unfortunately, there's a procedure for firing somebody according to civil service law, which our administrator was very unfamiliar with. And not only did the person get their job back, but they got it back with pay. And whether or not they got to keep the steaks, I'm not sure.
Do I have to give back the steaks?
Okay. So,
Dave is on the air.
oh, Dave is on the air.
Dave's on the air. He's your 7:30 guest.
That is correct.
Good morning, Dave.
Morning, Hugh. How are you?
Yes.
Hello, Dave. This is Hugh. Thanks for getting up, Dave. I know you're not a morning guy, but we are in the morning, and we'd like to talk to you, Dave, about first of all, Dave, could you give a little bit of your background for our listeners?
Sure, happy to.
Thank you.
I'm associate professor of history at University at Albany SUNY, and I'm working with two other historians, Ann Pfau, PFAU, and Stacy Sewell, SEWELL, on a National Endowment for the Humanities funded digital project, a website basically, that'll showcase the history of urban renewal in the Hudson Valley, including Kingston and Newburgh.
Wow.
Okay.
And Dave, this is Mario Catalano. I'm Hugh's morning partner.
Morning, Mario. How are you?
I am a SUNY graduate, SUNY at Buffalo, and I was a history major. So
great.
I had a
right around the time urban renewal was going on in the Hudson Valley.
I made a mistake and went to dental school, but I actually wanted to be a history professor, but didn't work out. So, but congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you tell us now? Is there like an overriding purpose here for having this information online? Is there are there a number of groups, organizations, whatever, that are participating? How did this all transpire?
Sure, that's a great question, and basically, excuse me. What we know about urban renewal has been generally from the federal policy level. Why the federal government decided to bankroll the massive clearance projects that we saw in cities like Kingston and Newburgh. And what really hasn't been told yet is the effect of urban renewal on places like Newburgh and Kingston and the residents of cities like Newburgh and Kingston. So our goal, our mission is to tell that story. And we do a lot of interviews with people who remember the period, who were affected by the events. As a matter of fact, we interviewed Hugh about a year ago.
Yep.
Thank you, Hugh. And we're also very interested in the visual record to document the areas that were demolished and lost forever. So the streetscapes, the buildings, the people's experiences. As far as a policy implication or effect on current events, in general, people who live in a city like Kingston are very interested in how the city was shaped in the city's history. So we're bringing that to the conversation by showing how urban renewal shaped a place like Kingston. More significantly, or more concretely maybe, urban renewal has left a legacy, along with practices like redlining and disinvestment. And some communities, like Newburgh, for example, are considering a system of community reparations where if you can show that your family was a victim of discriminatory housing practices, the city of Newburgh is considering a policy that would help you with a down payment or closing costs, several $1,000s. Several cities around the country, Evanston, Illinois, and Nashville, North Carolina, come to mind, have already implemented these community reparations policies. So urban renewal would be a large part of that in a place like Newburgh that's seeking to overcome this legacy of discrimination and housing practices that disproportionately affected the minority community.
Wow, that would be big news in Kingston. We're not familiar with the city government even discussing this possibility of reparations. Kingston, which you probably know, Dave, lost about 4,000 people from the urban renewal area, which was a significant part of its population. The population at the time, in round figures, was around 30,000. And some of those folks moved into other parts of the city. So they probably lost more than 4,000 people out of that area, because the net loss for Kingston between the 1960 census, when urban renewal was in the planning stages, and the 1970 census, when it was virtually completed, was a major loss in population. And,
and that is, one of the things we're finding is, we know a lot about urban renewal in places like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, the major cities. But if you think about the impact on a city like Kingston, urban renewal, we think, had much more of an impact on smaller cities than larger. The scale is certainly bigger in larger cities, but the overall effect on the entire community, Kingston, a city like Kingston's size or Newburgh's size, would have felt the effect throughout the entire city, not just in a particular neighborhood or part of the city. So yeah, losing 4,000 people to urban renewal and to other migratory patterns, more voluntary certainly than being forced out of your home for urban renewal, that had a major effect on smaller cities.
Dave, you compare Kingston and Newburgh. Obviously, we're interested in Kingston. How did they compare? Was it kind of a cookie cutter, kind of a blueprint that the federal government laid down that these cities around the country followed, or were they markedly different? Say Kingston and Newburgh, comparing those two projects.
There are a lot of similarities. Obviously, every city is different. Just to sort of zoom out and give you the 30,000-foot perspective, the federal government between 1949, when the program started, and 1974, when the program ended, so a 25-year period, federal government spent about $13 billion to finance the acquisition of property, relocation of residents, demolition of buildings, and clearance of these large parcels of land in 1,300 cities around the country. So $13 billion over a 25-year period in 1,300 villages, towns, and cities across the United States. Here in New York, about 90 communities took urban renewal funding, and the federal government funded about $1 billion worth of these projects. For a city of Kingston and Newburgh's size, under 25 or 30,000 people in population, the federal government covered 3/4 of the cost, and this is where a system of perverse incentives really kicks in. The federal government bankrolled 3/4 of the cost of acquiring land, relocating the residents, demolishing the buildings, and assembling these large parcels in the hopes that the cleared parcels would attract developers who then could bring in affluent residents and shoppers back to downtown cores. So that's the similarity. And the system of perverse incentives arises in how cities like Kingston and Newburgh, and this is what they had in common, one of the things they had in common, that 1/4 remaining local obligation, the city could defray that by building something like a school or a highway, and saying,
City Hall in Kingston's case,
$1 million on a highway.
Yeah.
In the case of both Kingston and Newburgh, both cities convinced the State Department of Transportation to build what I like to call arterials to nowhere, and those weren't really needed for traffic patterns. And the main purpose of arterials in both cities was to generate enough state income that would be credited to the city's local obligations, so the city of Kingston or the city of Newburgh would not have to pay the federal government a particular sum of cash to defray their local obligation.
And that obviously that had, as you indicated earlier, consequences. One of which was this locally. This was called the Road to Nowhere. It kind of dead ended at a state highway a couple of miles out of town, and so you could very quickly bypass Kingston. And Broadway Kingston, which is the main street, which you probably know, Dave, was the one of the commercial centers in the '60s of the city, and traffic. Because it had to, traffic was routed down Broadway, and people would stop and shop and do their business, and so they lost all that. And of course that led to the growth of commerce in the town of Ulster. So it was not a road to nowhere. Ultimately, it was a road to these huge box stores, shopping plazas.
They actually shot off a few of their toes on that one because they cost their local businesses, potentially a lot of revenue.
And one other, you mentioned how the city. I wrote about a lot of this as a young reporter at the local newspaper, the Daily Freeman, which was located just across the street in those days from the urban renewal area. We could look out our window, literally watch buildings come down. Was that in its scramble to create these what they call matching funds? The city abandoned its city hall on Broadway, which is a national landmark, and built a building in Rondout in the urban renewal area in order to they said to serve two purposes: to revitalize the theory, Dave, was if we build it, they will come. Well, they built it and nobody came for at least 10 years, and it was a very expensive proposition. It was they ultimately had to rebuild or reconstruct almost the old city hall on Broadway to the tune of about $7 or $8 million, and they spent about $2 million on the so-called new city hall in Roundup. But I think the real impact was on, as you indicated, on the people who were displaced, and where they went, and the center of Kingston now, the Midtown, so-called Midtown center of Kingston, which was a fairly stable section of town in the 60s and 70s. A lot of families in Kingston can trace their roots to being born and raised in that area of the town. Is sadly depressed. The crime and it's I think it's a consequence of urban renewal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I was fascinated also with the issue with City Hall, that the city government decided to build a new City Hall, which looks like, I don't know, something you would find in a strip mall. It's not a beautiful building. Compared to the old 1870s
Far
City
from
Hall.
it.
So I was always kind of surprised at the set of decisions made in the 70s about abandoning City Hall, opening the new City Hall in the Roundout, and then deciding, you know what, this isn't working, let's go back and rehab the old City Hall to the tune, as you say, of several $1 million. There's a great Bob Haynes photograph that the Daily Freeman, and I want to acknowledge the generosity of the Daily Freeman in allowing us to come into their photo morgue and their photo library and scan several hundred pictures that photographers like Bob Haynes, for example, had taken of urban renewal. And one of the Bob Haynes' photographs is of the old City Hall, now the again new City Hall or existing City Hall, with Kingston's urban renewal plan surrounded by dead pigeons on the floor.
Yeah, that's a classic.
And that sort of visually encapsulates what was allowed to happen in Kingston with respect to City Hall.
Now,
so yeah, a lot of the decisions, infrastructure survives several generations, and a lot of the decisions planners and city officials made in a city like Kingston or a city like Newburgh, the legacy of those decisions will be around well into the 21st century. So I think one lesson we could take away from urban renewal is, or any large-scale urban reshaping like that, is think a little bit about what this is going to look like in 50 years, and just don't think of the present moment.
Sure.
Yeah, or in other words, don't think of the next election. Dave, have you seen the policy change at the federal level, rather than bulldozing acres and acres of buildings to be more selective and more in these projects, or are these things just this program, as you indicated, was ended in 1974?
Yeah, the federal government, the origins of the policy in arose during World War II when urban overcrowding was a problem, and a lot of policymakers, the federal and local levels, were concerned that once GIs were sent home and demobilized, the housing conditions would be very crowded. So that's sort of where the policy arose. And people were also, planners and officials were also very concerned about slums. And so the idea was, massive slum clearance and replace the slums with new construction. By the mid-'60s, it became apparent in places like Kingston that this wasn't working as intended. So as people in localities like Kingston and Newburgh began to turn against the policy of urban renewal, that fed upward into national policy. So to give an example from Kingston, and Hugh, you may remember this from your reporting, in 1967, Congressman Joseph Resnick went to the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development and basically said, unless you fire the urban renewal director and the entire urban renewal board in Kingston, we're going to cut off your funding. Wow. And this was because Kingston Urban Renewal Agency was relocating people out of their homes without replacement housing to put them into. And the director of urban renewal at the time did his job as tearing things down as quickly as possible, and he didn't give much thought to what happened to the people after they were moved out of their homes. So episodes like this, and similarly in Newburgh, if you've been to Newburgh, you'll see that there's 115 acres of empty land on a steep hill going down to the river, and it'll probably never be redeveloped. As people in places like Kingston and Newburgh began to look around and say, this isn't really working, the federal government began to change course, and then when Richard Nixon was elected in 1968, and the era of high liberalism under President Johnson was effectively over, the federal government reevaluated its policies toward the nation's cities, and then replaced urban renewal with community development block grants, which did result in more local control. Urban renewal was a targeted program. You applied for a grant and loans from the federal government for a specific purpose. You couldn't use that money for anything else except what it was earmarked for. With community development block grants, in a community like Kingston, areas that have been underserved or unfunded by urban renewal, like Midtown, began to receive more attention because citizens, held meetings with city officials and said, "Hey, what about Midtown? What about what about this part of the city that hasn't seen any federal money?" So, as local people began to turn away from urban renewal, having seen the damage it had done, that fed upward into federal policy changes.
Okay, that's the way it ought to be, I would think.
And
yeah.
And Dave, one of the things that I was wondering, because I've only been in Kingston since 1969, so
you're a transient.
You're a newcomer.
I'm transient.
Right.
But by local standards, not anymore though. By the way, half of the city has only been here for less than a year. But anyway, one of the things that we always heard rumors about, and I don't know if you uncovered any information or any of this information while you were doing your investigative and research, but there were always issues of self-dealing. People, politicians that were connected or investing in the land and buying and building, and there was all kinds of crazy stuff that you hear on the street. You never see it. You don't have any proof of it. But did you uncover, or is there any suspicion that this whole urban renewal process was in some cases being abused by the folks who were supposed to be, watching the store?
Yeah, Plunkett of Tammany Hall, George Washington Plunkett, a turn-of-the-century Tammany Hall politician, famously called this sort of thing honest graft. And that sort of activity does not make it into official documentation.
Yeah.
So and especially 45, 50, 55 years after the fact. So it probably almost certainly did happen, and almost certainly I will not be able to find, as a historian going through official records, I will not be able to find any evidence of it. Now, where we might find evidence is through investigative journalism from the period. So in many ways, that's a question best addressed to Hugh.
Right.
From my perspective, not just my perspective, but I believe investigative journalism is pretty much dead in our era due to the cutbacks and particularly at the print level and elsewhere, the cutbacks in funding of supportive newspapers. The Freeman's an example. The Freeman has declined, which was a bustling newspaper in the 60s and 70s when I arrived there. The Freeman has declined from probably, in round figures, 30,000 circulation on Sundays to maybe 15, and even worse on weekdays, and up and down the Hudson Valley. This is all around the country. Print journalism is in serious trouble, and the staffs of reporters they had. I was free to roam around and talk to people and look up stuff. And as you indicated, Dave, the guy, if there was graft, it was really, really hard to even find it, and then B, document it. I mean, can you imagine some grafter talking to a reporter and say, "Yeah, I took money from the government."
Wasn't there a lot of rumor about who owned the land that the new city hall was built on? Was there some dealing going on down there that I recall that was really a big issue.
I'm not sure about that, Mario. I think the land legally was owned by the Urban Renewal Agency.
Oh, okay.
And their job was to assemble these 5-acre parcels. It's a pretty nice sized parcel.
Yeah, right.
And then market it. So I can't speak to that, but I think if there was graft involved, it was earlier in the process.
Yeah.
But we don't know.
The federal government and the state government both exercised oversight. So, cities determined what they wanted to do with particular urban renewal projects. It was left up to local control. But since this is federal and state money that's bankrolling, 7/8 of the cost in a place like Kingston, there was some oversight by the federal and state governments. Obviously, if the federal government is overseeing 1,300 municipalities, the federal government doesn't have the capacity or ability to make sure that the parcel where the new city hall is going to be doesn't have some sort of influence peddling going on. So even though there was federal and state oversight, that oversight could possibly have dealt with issues like who owned what parcel of land before the city bought it.
Dave, from your own research, which you and I talked about, Kingston, in one sense, sort of fixed itself in terms of how it approached urban renewal in its second phase. There were two phases of urban renewal in Kingston. The downtown phase was, bulldozers away. Mm-hmm. But uptown, which was a smaller project, was much more selective. It was almost surgical, where they would pick out areas to usually renovate. The Wall Street area, for instance, is an example. They put in all new utilities, underground, pipe plant, et cetera, et cetera. So they apparently learned something from the Broadway East project, but people still complain bitterly about how their neighborhoods were destroyed, and that the buildings that were there were substantial from the 19th century. And if you want to see what urban renewal, what Rondout looked like before urban renewal, you can just look across the street. There's right. three and four stories, which now has been after a long time. Yeah. We were out to dinner last night on a Thursday night. I could see Saturday night being busy. We couldn't find a parking space. We drove around. The place is booming now, so I guess there were some lessons learned, although for too many people, too late.
Yeah. In some ways, maybe this is going to be a bit controversial. In many ways, urban renewal, I'll offer 2 points. The first is Lynn Woods co-produced a great film called Lost Roundout, which really documents
Yeah.
the area that was demolished. And matter of fact, Lynn inspired us to look more deeply at Kingston several years ago. So we really got into the history of urban renewal in Kingston because of Lynn's film and Lynn's guidance. The second issue is, in many ways, Kingston's urban renewal over the long run succeeded. Again, compared to a place like Newburgh where nothing was built on the first urban renewal project land. It took longer than city officials planned or hoped for, but ultimately by 1990 or the turn of the century, Kingston has, a vibrant, affluent certainly, but a vibrant entertainment and restaurant, complex in the urban renewal area. The townhouses across the street from the older buildings, they're not architectural gems, but the land is being used. So in many ways, you can look back at Kingston in the long run and say, you know what, this turned out okay in the long run, not the short run necessarily. But in a place like Newburgh, I think we can call that a failure because that land will never be built on, or if it does get built on, it'll be at great expense. So Newburgh would have been better served by just leaving well enough alone.
Dave, I don't get to Newburgh very often, but it would seem to me that vacant land on the Hudson River, it's a steep hill, but they built, for generations they built buildings there and occupied them. I would think that developers would take a look at that property and say, this has got a lot of potential. It's on Newburgh Bay, one of the most beautiful areas of the Hudson Valley, and yet, like you say, like you suggest, it may never be developed. After 50 years, nothing's happened. With the population moving up the Hudson Valley now, as Mario mentioned a few minutes ago, he thinks that half the people in Kingston are from New York these days. Well, maybe not that many, but a significant number. And I don't know if they're moving. I know Beacon has been pretty much gentrified. That area has come back, but it's your judgment, and you're something of an expert here now. Is that Newburgh is just kind of hopeless? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if I would say that Newburgh is hopeless. There's a lot of community effort right now to figure out what to do with the land and again the system of community reparations that I mentioned earlier. So Newburgh has actively been considering what to do. And you're right, there's been a wave of gentrification in the Hudson Valley. Part of it is, the domestic architecture. The homes are beautiful, and they're cheap compared to what you would spend in Brooklyn or Manhattan. So, and the pandemic certainly exacerbated gentrification because, we saw ads on Airbnb, for example, rent a mansion in Newburgh for $5,000 a month, ride out the pandemic in a mansion in Newburgh, those sorts of ads. And Newburgh made the explicit decision in the 70s to try and market. The city government didn't, but there was a group of committed restoration, people who bought homes and restored them. There was a concerted effort to advertise in New York City newspapers to encourage New Yorkers to move up to Newburgh and restore some of these old, beautiful houses. As far as gentrification is concerned, that's an issue now, a problem now for creating and fostering cities that can have a mixture of incomes and ethnic groups. But gentrification would have been a problem that city officials would have killed for in the 60s. Getting affluent people back to downtown, that really was what urban renewal was all about. So even though we regard gentrification as a challenge to mixed income communities, and existing residents being priced out of their own homes because of higher property taxes, this is a problem that city officials in the 60s would have loved to have had.
Yeah, no question.
The one of the things I think that I'm not sure that it's deserved, but I think that Newburgh may have a different reputation. In terms of quality of life than Kingston does. And maybe that's one of the reasons that this is being held up. I'm not sure. But
the issue of the sloping land down to the river, that empty land, it certainly begs the question, well, in the 19th century they figured out how to build on it, so why can't we build on it now? Yeah. That's really a question of financing and economics. Once you have a building on the land that was built in the mid-19th century, it's a smaller scale proposition. But if you're going to entice a developer to develop 100 plus acres of land, that's an entirely different economic and financial proposition. As far as Newburgh's reputation, Newburgh has a reputation as being a small city with big city problems. And, I can't say to what extent that reputation is deserved, but yeah, that certainly is a factor in discouraging development in Newburgh.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Well, listen, we're about to come up to a break.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Dave, thanks so much for coming on at this awful hour in the morning, and thanks for your input. I'm sure our listeners would be have been very interested in your long-term perspective on our community. And thank you again for calling. And we'd like to call you at some future date, and we'll schedule you for the second half so you can sleep in a little bit.
That sounds good. Nice meeting you, Mario. And if folks are interested, they can contact me at my university email address. Again, I'm at SUNY Albany, and I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate all that input. It was great.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We'll go to break, and then we'll come back. Your guests are in the lobby.
All righty.
Okay, great.
You're listening to Kingston Community Radio on WGHQ Kingston. On your radio at 920 AM and 92.5 FM, and also online at mykcr.org.
Swimming pools are great for family fun, and Central Hudson wants you to play it safe. Never operate an electric appliance next to or in the pool. Be sure pool motors and filters are grounded. Have them installed by a professional and serviced by a licensed professional electrician. Be very careful if there are electric lines above or near a pool, especially if using long-handled cleaning tools. And if a storm is nearby, get out of the water. Your safety matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Thomas for Habitat for Humanity Restore. Habitat Restores are nonprofit home improvement stores and donation centers that sell new and gently used furniture, building materials, and appliances to the public at a fraction of the retail cost. The Ulster County Restore at 406 Route 28 in Kingston needs your donations. Call our hotline at 845-853-7499 to schedule your free pickup. And thanks.
Everyone is talking about healthcare these days. America spends twice that of other developed countries on our healthcare system, yet our health ranks near the bottom. How can we stop spending so much and getting so little? By shifting to a system that gives more patients access to strong primary care. Primary care can help make America healthy again. To learn more about the benefits of primary care, visit www.healthisprimary.org. This message is brought to you by America's Family Physicians.
Screening exams for breast, lung, or colorectal cancers are necessary to detect and treat disease at its earliest, most curable stage. But you may have some concerns and questions. Answer your questions and ease your fears by visiting radiologyinfo.org. In addition to information on screening and wellness, you'll find more than 200 descriptions of radiologic exams, procedures, and treatments to help you prepare. Get informed and be prepared. Visit radiologyinfo.org, produced by the Radiological Society of North America and the American College of Radiology.
Hi, this is Jared Mans from the Spring Lake Fire Department, and I support Kingston Community Radio, and so should you.
This portion of Kingston Community Radio has been brought to you by the First Savings Bank in Ulster County that still remains local to this day. Ulster Savings Bank, a community bank that's invested in local business, invested in community, invested in you. Ulster Savings Bank, your one-stop resource for everything local. Locations throughout the Hudson Valley and online at ulstersavings.com. Member FDIC.
Right, you're on.
Don't forget Hal Sings.
Okay, folks. As you know, we have a tradition on Fridays of doing birthdays for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So let's start with Friday's birthdays, July 23rd. So we want to wish a happy birthday to Judd Hornbeck, and that's with love from Marianne and William Banks Jr. And we have a second birthday today. Please wish a happy birthday to Emma Daly from your friends at People's Place. We hope you enjoy your special day. And, of course, the winner today of the Boyce Dairy Milk House famous cow pie is Emma Daly. Emma, you can congratulations, and you can pick up your cow pie at the Boyce Dairy Milk House, 62 O'Neill Street, Kingston, and that comes to you courtesy of the Boyce Dairy Milk House and Kingston Community Radio. Now we have a special guest birthday announcer. Hugh Reynolds is going to do Saturday the 24th because we also have one of his friends who's celebrating a birthday.
Well, I knew Judd Hornbeck too, or I know Judd, I should say. Judd is still with us. This is a special occasion. Hal Sampson from Rosendale is celebrating his 99th birthday on the 24th, and I did a feature on Hal a couple of years ago when he was the bartender at the Rosendale American Legion post. He was a 97-year-old bartender, and believe me, he was up and down that bar. That guy really tended the bar well, and a World War II veteran, and a real character and a great guy. And shortly thereafter, Hal contracted cancer at 97 or 8, and it was pretty serious, and all kinds of procedures, and as often happens with that dreaded disease, and tough as nails, Hal has survived. Now, he's not back behind the taps that I know of yet, but he survived to his 99th birthday. So a personal happy birthday to Hal Sampson of Rosendale.
And it says here that he's still going strong and helping to run the senior club. Wow. And Hal, this happy birthday comes to you from your friends at the Rosendale Seniors. And we have a second birthday, wish happy birthday to Janet Solo from your friends at People's Place. We hope you enjoy your special day. Happy birthday to David Toman from your friends at People's Place. And these folks at People's Place, they have a lot of friends.
I'm one of them. I'm a People's Place volunteer, too.
All right. Well, this should come as no surprise, but the big winner of the famous cow pie for July 24th tomorrow is Hal Sampson.
Way to go, Hal.
Hal, keep it going, baby. And all I can say is bartending is a way to longevity, is the way I see it.
Both sides.
And so, Hal, you can pick up your cow pie tomorrow or any day, actually, at the Boyce Dairy Milk House, 62 O'Neill Street in Kingston. And now let's get Sunday. We have a couple on Sunday. So let's please wish a happy birthday to Santo Harris from your family and friends. And we have a happy birthday to Kathleen. Can you read that name?
Furman.
Okay. Kathleen Furman. Please, if you would print when you send these in, we would love it. And for your friends and many friends, enjoy a good day, Kathleen. And, of course, another happy birthday from the folks at People's Place to their good friend, Patricia Marsh. And the winner of the famous cow pie for Sunday is Kathleen Furman. Somebody printed that for me.
I thought so, yeah.
And that comes to you again courtesy of the Boys Dairy Milkhouse, Kingston Community Radio. You can pick it up at 62 O'Neill Street in Kingston.
All right, why don't you give the phone number?
Happy birthday to all. So we're about to start our next segment. And today we've invited a couple of folks from the Resource Recovery Agency to join us. We will let them introduce themselves in a second, but we are available for calls. 331-9255. 331-9255. If you have any questions during the course of the next hour. So there's you and I have been extremely concerned about what's going to happen as we move forward with our solid waste situation here in Ulster County, because right now we cart our refuse to a landfill that's still operating near Syracuse. However, I think we've been notified that landfill's kind of on life support. It's not going to be around much longer, and the folks at the RRA, we're told, have been working very diligently to try and come up with some solutions and for what we're going to do. And we also have with us a guest who handles the sustainability aspect of life at the RRA. So why don't you folks introduce yourselves and tell the folks that are listening what you do and what kind of specifically what your jobs are, and then we can get into some of the issues that we previously.
Yeah. So my name's Timothy DeGraff. I'm the executive director and the controller at the Resource Recovery Agency. I've been there since January of 2007. I guess we'll wait to get into it, but Angie and I both have quite a bit to say on that. And I think part of it is and that's why, and thank you for inviting us to be on today, because a lot of our information and our side of things and what's going on does not get out there. And we've been talking recently, especially in the past couple of weeks, that we need to figure out a way to communicate more with the general public, communicate more with the legislature, the town of Ulster, who hosts our composting facility and the transfer station. Supervisor Quigley actually invited us to a board meeting last week to answer questions and be addressed by the town board there. And we went there on Thursday and did that. And I had gotten a phone call actually the next day from Councilman Van Cleek, thanking us again for showing up, because they always felt like they were closed off on the topic, and the community didn't feel like they had a say as to what was going on, and the RRA just did whatever it wanted without listening. So that's really important for us to be able to start communicating better and to make sure that we, get our message and what we're doing out there, and just to provide information as well. And Angie does a fabulous job, along with our recycling educator, Melinda France, especially since she came on board. They have so much educational material, and they've done so much and so many programs, and she's going to speak about what she's been doing this July for Plastic Free July. So I think that message and our message and just communicating is going to be very, very important, especially going forward.
Tim, were you a financial officer before you were promoted?
Correct. Yep.
So your basic training is in finance.
Yes, I spent 5 years at a CPA firm when I got out of college. I worked for Sickler, Torch Allen, and Churchill.
You are a CPA?
Yes, I am a CPA. I worked out of the Hudson office, but they do have a Lake Katrina office as well. And I did all aspects of tax, audits. I audited school districts, insurance companies, towns, villages, so all municipalities. Preparing financial statements, I ran audits. I was an in-charge auditor as well. So I have a lot of experience on that side. And I've always said to people, when you're on the regulatory or the compliance side, everything it's by the book. It's by your audit programs, what you check off. And then when I went to the other side, I was like, oh, now I know why some of the clients would get upset with me when I would write the stuff up. Because sometimes in business, right, stuff just happens, you know, and you can't just follow by the book. You got to adapt from day to day at times. So.
Okay, thank you.
And this young lady.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for having us on the show. My name's Angelina Pioni. I'm the Director of Sustainability at UCRA. Which is a really fun job and opportunity to help work with the agency, with the board, with the public to bring environmental sustainability to the way that we manage waste. Prior to being the Director of Sustainability, I was the recycling coordinator for about 2.5 years at the agency, in a similar role in promoting recycling and composting programs to the general public, to municipalities, to waste haulers, you know, encouraging recycling compliance, as everyone is required to recycle in Ulster County, but also promoting, you know, recycling education in our school system, in working with other community groups. I get involved in a lot of special recycling programs, like we have a household hazardous waste collection program that we offer throughout the year for toxic chemicals and things that shouldn't be discarded. So really just promoting that ethos of environmental sustainability in the way that we manage waste and looking out into the future. As you said, the future of solid waste is a really exciting horizon. It's very innovative with all the different types of recycling programs that are available and out there. And so that's part of my job to assist the agency with researching some of those things and looking at what might be feasible for us here in Ulster County.
So one of the things that always confuses me is we recycle. I've got one of these massive waste management yellow and green cans or whatever, and they pick it up every 2 weeks. And this week, I mean, we had to put some of it in my neighbors who were on vacation because we can't even get all the stuff in there. But what happens to that? I mean, I got newspapers in there. I've got bottles in there, cans. I mean, everything under the sun's in that can. How do you? What? Can you just describe briefly what happens to that stuff?
Absolutely, it's fascinating how much technology goes into sorting and preparing those containers for recycling in end markets. So what you're describing is called single stream recycling, where everything is going in the same container. And when that gets to a recycling center, we sometimes call them a materials recovery facility or a MRF. What happens is all of that material has to be then sorted. It's almost like when you're in the kitchen and you bake a cookie and you put all the ingredients together, right? So recycling is all about taking the cookie back apart again, taking the chocolate chips out, taking the eggs out, taking the milk out. So it sounds very complicated, and it certainly is. So that material will go through a network of conveyors and gears and machinery that's going to assist with separating that. So metal.
That's all automated?
Most of it's automated. Certain metals will be pulled out with magnets or eddy current separators. Glass will be broken on a vibrating plate, so it gets crushed and then diverted from that stream. And then in single stream, they have what's called optical sorters, which are really fascinating pieces of equipment. They actually shoot a laser beam down at the containers as they're going down the line, and the laser can measure the amount of light that's absorbed by the plastic. And so in that way, they're able to tell which plastics are which, and they use air vents to then push them in different categories. So they can separate absolutely every single type of container that way. It's really fascinating. So once all that material is separated, it gets consolidated into bales or big bricks, or think of them as giant Lego blocks, right? And once there's enough of that particular product to go to the market, it will go to end markets of different types of recyclers that will then shred that material, melt it down into pellets, flakes, fibers, and send it to manufacturers who are going to turn those raw materials back into new plastics or new metals or new glass and things like that. That's the general gist of it. But it's also, we talked about the equipment and all that, but recycling is still very much so with manpower. right? A workforce. There's also, even in single stream recycling centers, real people that are sorting through that material. They remove trash out of the recycling, as people recycle a lot of crazy things in their bin, and help that process along. So even though there's a lot of equipment involved, real sanitation workers still assist with sorting the
These would be
recycling.
considered green jobs.
Absolutely. And in fact, there's over 100,000 jobs in recycling in the United States. So it's a very huge industry. A lot of green jobs in recycling, very good jobs in recycling too, because it's a dirty job. It's a tough job. Somebody's got to do it. And I want to comment too about how dangerous it can be to work in that recycling industry. Because like I said, people want to recycle all kinds of crazy stuff, diabetics put their needles in coffee tins and try to recycle it that way, or people put scrap metal in their recycling bin. It could harm people, injure workers and stuff like that. So it's really important to recycle correctly and try to avoid some of that wishful recycling.
Tim, this is probably your end of the spectrum, but this market that's for recyclables has changed, as I understand it, aka China, in recent years. What effect has that had on your operation?
Yeah, there's a couple parts to that, and if I could just add on to the single stream, there's a myth to single stream that's out there that you convert to single stream and you'll recycle more. Yeah, you're going to put more, right? You have like you said, you have two containers, right? What ends up happening a lot of times is people end up just putting more in that toter for recycling because, like Angie said, wishful recycling. So your recycling does end up going up, but it also ends up devaluing the product. So, they say single stream in general, you recycle 25 to 30% more. But what people forget is when it goes through that process, through the materials recovery facility, right, you end up with your residuals going up higher. 25 to 30% still ends up getting landfill. So the question is, even though you put it in that toter, are you really recycling it? So what's single stream recycling really about? It's not about recycling. It was about the haulers, saving money where the rubber meets the road.
Literally.
So going back to China, right? Ultimately, China ended up being able to create their own infrastructure from a recycling standpoint, more of like vertical integration, right, on a supply chain. They were tired of us sending their trash, which is what single stream has ultimately become. And so even from a financial standpoint, right, you have profit margins. So on the garbage side, you would pay to get rid of it on a tipping fee, but then you would get rid of it cheaper, and that creates your margin. But on the recycling side, it used to be the other way around, right? If you were a market, you'd buy it and you'd resell it at a higher amount to create that margin. When all the stuff went down with China, we like to pay attention to waste management. They're number one for a reason in the world. They know what they're doing. They're very smart. They never stopped single stream recycling. It's interesting because it's going to cost us, at the time, 60, 70, reached over $100 a ton to get rid of it down at the Beacon facility where we used to send it. How are they still doing this? We know why they're still doing it. They've turned that profit margin mechanism, right, into the same trash mechanism. Now they're getting paid tip fees for the single stream recycling and getting rid of it cheaper. So that's on the the business side. That's how.
How does it affect you though, Tim?
How did it affect us? We made the decision to not accept single stream anymore. That was 2 or 3 years ago now. And the biggest effect ended up being on the city of Kingston, who was doing single stream at the time, and we had to convert them back to dual stream. And so that's why we're seeing, good numbers in our recycling center now, is because we have a lot of good dual stream product because all of our town transfer stations are required to stay dual stream, So we provide the service, it's only $91 a pull. We've had some of the towns try and go out to bid, and like the lowest for a pull was like $350 a pull.
Yeah.
So we save them a lot of money on that end, but we also need to make that up somewhere. So keeping them dual stream is the way that we do it. Now, in recent years, especially last year and 2 years ago, the markets, they were down. And that was a major effect really from China because the markets were converting to more domestic. Luckily, our products were being sold to domestic markets, which helped us stay consistent throughout those down times. But with COVID and everything opening back up now, that's why you're seeing the market be what we call scary high, because the plastic market's like natural. I believe the last quote we got for natural was $1.09 a pound. You're talking about something that usually we've always seen ranging between 20-40 cents a pound.
Wow, that's a big increase.
It's like
Huge.
I said, it's scary high because, right, you look at any market, you look at the graphs, they all go like this.
Yeah.
Well, right now we're up here, so you got to be aware. So when I'm getting ready to do the budget right now, trying to plan for.
What's your fiscal year?
It's calendar year.
Okay.
Calendar year. Yep. So when you're trying to do the budget and plan for this, it's just a moving target. There's too many variables because you're talking about each different product, right? There's different variables for each different product as well. Everybody was buying out all the toilet paper last year.
Yeah.
We, our director of operations and compliance, I remember sitting in his office when all that was going on, and we were just talking about like everybody else. Hey, did you get toilet paper yesterday? No, I couldn't get it. They were sold out. And we were just chatting about it a lot, and we were like, you know what? The paper markets are going to improve. Because we were dealing, when I did the budget last year, I thought we were going to be paying to get rid of paper.
Oh.
I budgeted this recycling disposal this year. It hasn't happened. It went the other direction because ultimately paper ended up going up because of COVID.
Tim, we have a lot of areas we want to cover, but I just want to ask one last quick question regarding recycling. What impact has the county's ban on plastic bags and knives and forks and things like that had on your flow of material? Has it been noticeable? It's been in effect for 2 or 3 years now. Maybe Angelina.
Maybe Angie's better from my end as far as from a financial standpoint. I don't know that it's going to have an effect. And probably what Angie.
Yeah, from a material point of view, those items are very, very lightweight. It doesn't represent a lot of material that passes through the facility, but that doesn't mean that there aren't incredible benefits to those pieces of policy. We mentioned plastic bags. When people put plastic bags in their recycling bin, we call them tanglers. Things like bags, garden hoses, coat hangers, they get jumbled all up in all of this equipment that I was talking about and can cause more injuries. It wastes time, it wastes money, and it ruins the value of the recyclables that end up getting sorted at the end. Same thing with plastic forks and straws and cutlery. Those are really small items that don't make their way through the entire recycling process. So we always like to say if it's smaller than a tennis ball, you shouldn't put it in your recycling bin because it's going to jam the gears, jam the conveyors, and not actually get captured through the system. So that's wonderful from a process standpoint, but I think it also sends a message to our community members that a lot of this single-use disposable plastic in our lives can really be avoided, and it can be really easily avoided. So I think the benefit is really holistic on the way that businesses think about food service, the way that consumers think about buying and choosing different products, and all the reusable stuff that we could use that would reduce the amount of trash that we're making. So I think that has a lot of benefits to it, but from a material standpoint, it's not a lot of volume that we're talking about.
Kat, I got a question.
If I may expand too, as we were talking about dual stream, and some of your listeners might not know what that means. So at UCRA, we process dual stream recycling, which means that there's two or more streams. The cardboard and the paper products, the fiber, is kept totally separate than the commingled containers, which are your plastic, glass, and your metal. So by separating the fiber from those 3D containers, it actually results in a much higher quality product, right? Because you're not getting your wet cat food cans slapped on your newspaper, and then the value of the newspaper is lower. And you can also really zoom in on certain containers or certain shapes or certain plastics that are very highly recyclable and focus on that going back to a simple message about recycling. If it's a bottle, a jug, a jar, those are the shapes that we want to be recycling. So I think it's easier for consumers to understand that rather than in single stream where you say, oh, put everything in the bin. People really want to put everything in the bin, and that's where we get into that wish cycling. So garden hoses, butcher knives, children's toys, coat hangers, those are all not the shapes that we should be recycling. Again, if it's a bottle, a jar, a jug, those are the shapes that we should recycle as much as possible.
Tim, I'd like to get into, for the listeners' edification, the governance of the RRA.
Can I just give the phone number?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so folks, if anybody wants or has any questions for Tim or Andy, just give us a call here at 331-9255. We're taking questions if you've got them. We've got answers.
The agency was set up, I believe, in in 92?
December 1986. Is
Okay, I'm off by a few years. Yeah, it's governed by a board of directors, which is appointed by the county legislature.
Correct. It's the way it's technically set up is whoever the chair of the legislature gets 4 appointments, and then the minority party is supposed to get 1.
Wow.
It's sometimes you're chasing your tail, right? If the majority changes,
Yeah.
or the chair changes, but that's how it's set up.
I was not aware of that.
Yes.
And do those appointments have to be approved by the full legislature, or?
Yes.
So the legislature ultimately.
Yes. Yep.
And what is their what is the legislature? We're getting into some of the politics here, but what is the legislature's responsibility in terms of oversight? Do they just appoint people? What's it, 7 people on your board?
5.
5 people. Those 5 members. They just, okay, you're in charge. See you next year, or see you when there's a vacancy. And you've been there long enough to see different administrations and a lot of different legislators of how this is governed. I guess what it comes down to, who's really in charge? Is it the legislature by their appointments, the board by its oversight? How does it work?
Yeah, the way it's supposed to work is they appoint our board, and that's it from a day-to-day oversight setting policy standpoint. That's why we have a board. That's why it's set up that way. And the other solid waste authorities are like Rockland, for instance, is set up the same way. They have more board members than us, but it's still with the concept of the board provides.
So they want some independence there from the.
Absolutely, we have an agreement with the county to handle the solid waste and to be the planning unit, which is why we're the ones who drafted the local solid waste management plan. And I do report to the Energy and Environment Committee on a monthly basis.
Who is the chairman of that committee now?
Manager Green is.
Okay.
So, but as far as the board then, originally when they were set up, they had the responsibility to make the decision, do we want an executive director here, or do we want the board to essentially handle that function? They decided, obviously, to go with the executive director approach. So the executive director is responsible for managing the facility day in and day out. They're in charge. And then the board then provides the oversight over that. Your basic checks and balances. The board has to set policy with the help of the executive director or staff, but they're the ones who make those types of decisions. So that way, like I said, you have your basic checks and balances. But they don't have to, for instance, go check with the legislature to see if, what they're doing is right or anything like that. That being said, right, you still should have some type of working relationship with the legislature and talking to them and let them know what's going on, because they have to, make the laws. So when you bring up and Angie and I have made lots of efforts to deal directly with the Department of Environment as the like the arm or the leg or an attachment or whatever you want to call it of the county, because that's, in my opinion, I feel like that's why that department was set up, because that's what they do day in and day out. That's their responsibilities. So we've had grants with the Department of the Environment. We touch base with them. There's something that we're looking into with regards to food waste diversion at the towns that we started discussing with the Department of the Environment. So we really try to work together with them with operational type of stuff. But when it comes to, say, policies, long-term planning, at some point you're going to need the assistance of the legislature. We used to have bonding authority up to $40 million, for example. But that got reduced, I think, back in 2015 to where we can't go out to bonding without full legislative approval on anything over $500,000. That's really, really low. At the time when it happened, I was very much against it because of everything I just said. It brings into more oversight and more involvement, which can hamper day-to-day operations. One of the things I think that gets missed about our agency is if you were to sit in that front office, and I know you've been there, Hugh, speaking to the former executive director, the trucks just keep going by. You know what I mean? It's not your normal type of government function. You know, I'll bring up a school district, right? When does the business office really get busy? You know, tax time when they're collecting taxes or when they're doing the budget. But other than that, you know, there's not, for lack of a better saying, there's not a lot going on day to day. Whereas us, those trucks just keep going by. And what's our number one goal at the end of the day is to make sure that those floors are cleaned in a responsible and environmentally friendly manner. Because especially, you know, we want to make sure hazardous waste isn't going to a landfill and being buried. So that's what our main goal is right now. So when outside people who aren't there every day seeing everything, how can you make decisions when you're not involved? So there has to be a communication there, but you also need that level of independence because you're just not seeing everything.
Why was your bonding authority reduced? You know.
I'm not sure what the thought process was. I do know that there was at the time there was a good relationship with our chair and the chair of the legislature. So I wasn't privy to those conversations. It's not that I don't want to answer it. I just honestly can't give you an accurate answer because I wasn't sitting in with that. I know there was some concerns at that time about forcing us to convert our MRF to a single stream facility, and I think there was support to not do that, and they worked something out so that the legislature would have. That's what the thinking process was. It wasn't necessarily. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily to say stop that conversion, but that's what kicked off the discussion. Is my point? Is maybe if you're going to do something big, make sure that.
Well, something big is reducing your bonding authority from 40 million to 500,000. That's
like
huge.
Like I said, I was totally against that because it didn't make any sense from the basic structure of how the agency is set up and why it was set up the way it was.
Okay, let's talk about, as Mario indicated, down the road. It's been said, and I can't recall where I read this, that New York State will never, ever allow anybody, Ulster, Dutchess, Rockland, anybody locate a new landfill in this state of New York. And so all this talk and studies and guys, Charlie Landy came up with I don't know how many spots. I thought he'd be in my backyard after a while, but they were large.
Carries his maps around with him.
Yeah, Charlie's Charlie. But I mean, there's a large parcels, and they were generally rural, and from 1,000 feet in the air, it probably looked okay on paper. Now I understand you're down to 2 maybe in Warsing.
Yeah, a little more backstory to that. So. Because I know there's been a lot of stuff out there about us budgeting, not budgeting for feasibility studies on landfills, and I'm the one who will hold off on that because you can Google like certain areas of Ulster County, you know, New York City watershed, by the Hudson River, agricultural land, urban area. You're not putting a landfill in the city of Kingston, right? So urban areas, environmental justice areas. When you take all those maps.
Excuse me, what is an environmental justice area?
The concept behind that is trying to essentially, no pun intended, dumping something onto a less fortunate area.
It's called a host community.
Well, that's what I was getting to. In order to get that across, you basically. Here's a host community benefit. Let us put this
bribery.
Yeah. Well, you said it, not me. But incentive is the proper word. And sometimes you seek out those less fortunate areas in order to get that done because they're going to want that incentive more than say a higher class area. So that's why that concept came about.
Making sure there's an equitable distribution of things that may have environmental benefits or may have environmental harms to being in a community. So making sure you're not targeting low-income communities or communities of color when you're making those types of decisions. And not just about solid waste, but where to put a highway, where to put a, manufacturing plant. So environmental justice is an emerging idea that's really important.
Well, Angie, you're the expert in this area. my understanding is that these new landfills, what few that are being established, are quite a bit different than the old town dumps.
Yes, absolutely. So when people hear that word landfill, they think of the landfills of yesteryear, the dumps that were just open pits that people would bring their trash in. And so starting, in the 1970s, the late 1970s, the environmental movements, I think we all started to wake up to the environmental harms of doing business that way. The creation of the EPA, the creation of the New York State DEC, they came out with new regulations about the way that those types of sites should be conducted and engineered. So the landfills that are built today are very different than the landfills built in yesteryear. They're designed by engineers, they're designed by scientists, they're approved by professional regulators. They have a series of different liner systems that are like geosynthetic layers of material and rock and clay to make sure that any compaction of waste going on in that area is not going to leach any rainwater, processed water, what we call leachate, into the environment.
Approved a landfill that you're aware of anywhere in this state?
That's a great question. And, I can't speak on behalf of DEC, but I know that there are about 30 landfills in New York State. They're spread out all over the place. Many of them are reaching capacity. So we talk a lot about, because they were built in the 70s, right?
Recently.
When those,
Recently.
Recently. Not in my take in my career path that I'm aware of because of a lot of reasons.
As our two experts here, if you were a betting person and we were going to go to Las Vegas and we would say, okay, what are the odds that we could get a landfill approved in Ulster County? What would you say?
You want this? Yeah, I'll happily take it.
Yeah, the remarks I want to share is that we have a huge momentum of environmentalism in Ulster County. We have a lot of community assets like the Hudson River, for example, like tourism, like industries of agriculture. So I think that a big challenge is communicating this, finding a site that would be adequate to manage Ulster County's volume is going to be very challenging. And even, if we do get to that point, I think communicating the value of a local waste system like that will be very challenging because we have this incredible momentum of environmentalism in Ulster County, which is a wonderful thing. Something that we're all really proud of, right? We're all very proud of the bag ban and the skip the straw law and the mandatory recycling law here. We even have a composting law now in Ulster County. So this is all progress in a really important direction. But nobody wants a landfill in their backyard, right? It's called NIMBY. There's a lot of pushback because nobody wants to live next to these type of facilities. So Tim, do you want to?
We've heard that message for 40 years.
If I could hop back on to what I was saying about the maps. So if you had taken those maps I was talking about and you put them on top of one another, hold them up to a window and look, do you know basically where you're left with? Winston Farms.
Get out.
Are we playing that
pristine
game? Are we playing that game again? So when I'm
dump here never? You lived through that.
Yeah. So when I realize that, I'm like, I'm not gonna spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a feasibility study. What I want first is, as Angie was talking about, with like how the soils are set up. I want maps to basically eliminate all the places first before we decide is this site feasible. And then when she talks about the communities welcoming something like that. Back to Charles Landy, when his list is constantly published, I always get an email or a phone call. You're not putting it there. So I've never said anything about it, right. but my point is nothing's even been done or said or we're going to do, and I'm already getting pushback.
Yeah.
So you're going to Vegas. Do you think it's going to happen? I can tell you one thing. You can bet all your money that it's not going to happen by the time Seneca Meadows might close, because you're talking 10 to 15 years just on permitting. It just took us almost 2 years to get our permit renewed just for the transfer station that was already there. And the DEC's had a lot of retirements, right? They're short-staffed right now, so them getting all their stuff done is all pushed back. Yeah. So, and that's not to say with the new technologies on landfills it wouldn't have been the best idea for Ulster County, because we know from a financial perspective and to be able to control all that, that probably would have been the best idea. But I just don't think it's something that's going to happen here, and that's just reality.
So I know from visiting in Europe that they seem to be very fond of burn plants. They actually convert them into electricity. They're very environmentally friendly. They scrub them. Nothing gets into the air, or very little gets. I mean, they're years ahead of us. I think, in terms. I mean, of course, when you visit, I mean, the houses are one on top of the other. You go to Rome, they're still working off of Roman aqueducts, for crying out loud, in some places where they're getting,
I laugh when you're saying this, because what was it, like a month ago? I went into Angie's office and I plopped down. I basically said what you're saying. And I said, Ange, why aren't we doing all the stuff they're doing over in Europe? And I'll let you answer the question. You answered it to me.
Yeah, it's a keen observation that Europe is way ahead with recycling, the way that they manage waste. What you're describing, waste to energy, there's a lot of different types of technologies. It's not all incineration. People think of a burn plant, they think smokestacks. Again, people have this idea of what these waste management systems look like, and it's because we're all really traumatized from the way things used to be done. Looking ahead into the future of these technologies, there's gasification, there's pyrolysis, there's all different types of thermal treatments of waste that are not incineration. It's in the absence of oxygen, so you're not creating a lot of those old pollutants that, when you think of a burn plant, that you would. And like you said, you can generate a renewable energy source, an alternative energy source, from these types of these thermal treatments of wastes. And they're regulated in those countries where they are. There's some in America that are emerging. They have data, they have research, they have a lot of science that goes into them. And the emissions, from an emissions standpoint, they're significantly lower than the thresholds in a lot of cases. So I think it's an interesting concept. Is definitely something that we have a duty to look at all the options. As Ulster County's Solid Waste Authority, we have a duty to evaluate every scenario. So would we put all of our eggs in that basket? Probably not. But is it something that's new, innovative, and would get us closer to zero waste? Yeah. And I think that that's enough to convince me that maybe it's something that we should be looking at, as part of all the options. But Europe is ahead of the game for a lot of reasons.
If that's something that we should be looking at, when does that look take place? Are you looking at it now? Or are you talking to some of the groups, the constituencies out there, especially what I call, the crazies? Are you getting
the weird science? Yes, so that's our duty, really.
Fringe is better than crazy.
They make the most noise and then have no solutions.
As we're setting out on a new 10-year planning horizon for the future of solid waste,
You've really got a 4 or 5 year horizon, don't you?
We have to look at all these options, and we had a presentation to our board of directors just this spring by one organization, one company. Tim and I and our director of operations were all working really closely to see what's out there. Some of these technologies are proven. Some of them are still a little experimental. And so that's also a challenge with our regulators to present an option that they're going to be really comfortable with. And none of this happens overnight, as you get the sense of that. So we are looking at all of the options, and it's going to take a little bit of everything, right? Tim, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, we have had meetings with different technology companies already. We actually had a discussion, because they are our peers in the industry with waste management, asking them what they've looked at. And now, mind you, as I said before, they're number one in the world.
Absolutely.
They have an entire research and development department dedicated to exactly what you're asking us, and they haven't figured it out.
Tim, does Dutchess County have a burn facility?
They do, and actually, I've recently reached out to Lindsay who's the executive director over there. I've spoken to her in the past year because that was around before the Ulster Resource Recovery Agency started. They're looking at the same problem. I've spoken to Rockland. They've got the same problem with regards to what are we going to do. Because the burn plant in Dutchess, they're envisioning somewhere between 5 and 10 years left on it. So that's our neighbor that's got something going on. So, so myself, Lindsay, and Jerry, who runs the Rockland, have actually started some dialogue to start getting back together so that we can have these same discussions as to what are we going to do, because we're all in the same boat.
Is this the nouveau regional approach, which didn't work before?
Not necessarily. I just think it's important for us to
be talking to each other.
To be talking, to even to brainstorm.
So it would seem that that's not really an option for us being Ulster. If they're already approaching serious capacity issues, and they probably don't want a lot of garbage coming across the river to them, do they?
No. Dutchess, we've spoken to them in the past, and actually the initial problem with us going to Dutchess really is
the money.
It's more expensive. Usually the closer you are to a disposal facility, the more expensive it is for disposal. So
even if you put in the trucking and the rest of it that you now pay?
Yep.
Wow.
So we've even had over my years, I've had, you talk about different administrations coming through and different board members. It seems like there's always one that'll bring up Taylor down in Orange County, and it's like they bid on our stuff before, and it's like $80 a ton for disposal. And at the time when this first came up, we were paying like $39 for transportation and disposal. Wow. So it wasn't going to work.
We got about 10 minutes. Let's talk about the composting situation. I find it a kind of a paradox in the sense that there isn't an environmentalist in the world that I've ever heard of that isn't in favor of composting. I mean, it just makes sense with the food waste and things like that. You reduce, blah, 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 blah. And yet, when you go to a major increase in your composting, I think you went from whatever factor, which sounds like you're going in the right direction. You're composting a lot more stuff, and you're selling it. You're making you're generating revenue for your operation, which you always need. There's a lot of pushback here about it. Particularly, Mary, you can speak to the smell. You gave it the sniff test, didn't you? I mean, you rode along the river road.
Oh yeah, no. I've smelled it. I've smelled it crossing the bridge on occasion.
I actually live in Red Hook, and so I cross the bridge back and forth every single day. I just told a story to the town of Ulster. Even on the weekends, I'll be crossing the bridge, and the window will be down. And I'm sticking my head out the window. And, my kids are like, what are you doing? I'm working. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm sniffing because so when you tell us that you smell it, we want to know when. We don't want to know, so what was going on, how, where. And we right now, we're getting frustrated on our side because we're hearing that there's all these complaints recently, which is strange for us because our food waste those first 4 months is down 60% from the prior year. We're not making as much compost. Why are our complaints up when we don't have as much? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And when I try and reach out and find out where are the complaints coming from, when are they smelling it, for how long are they smelling it, so that we can get answers as to what's going on.
Patterns or whatever.
I can't get any responses. So I've been working with...
If I smell it again, I will call you.
Please do. Please do.
Because I do some work out at the airport too, and that's right in the, that corridor.
Yeah, so the airport's a good example because, I do know that there's been, the smells have reached Whittier and even over to Cuckoo Lane, right? The last time that happened in April, I'm coming across the bridge in the morning, and I'm like, whoa, right? And I drive down.
Do you smell it?
I rarely do I smell
coming across the bridge.
But this particular day in early April, I smelled it. I'm like, whoa. And I took the trip down around Ulster Landing Road, and there's places I picked it up, and I picked it up down at Cuckoo Lane. And I drive into the facility, and I go see our ops guy, and I talk to him, and he goes, yeah, our stacker's down, which is one of the big pieces of equipment that we had bought to mitigate odors. Mind you, all this mitigation of odors that we were trying to do was all done in coordination with our permits and with the DEC's approval. So the purchase of the equipment, the concrete work that we did down there, the huge amount of concrete padding we put down, because it used to just be mud.
I remember.
Yeah,
I
and
used
it
to-
would puddle up, and so we did a lot of work down there.
The ugly
and,
stuff.
Yeah, and including employees' earlier starting time, so that when people are commuting across the bridge, the smell is dissipated. So we've done a lot of work, like I said, with the DEC to mitigate those odors, which we've done. Because we speak to the Bridge Authority a lot, who's right next to us.
Yeah.
And the DEC, I know, had spoken to the owner of the airport at the time, who had said, yeah, no, it used to be bad, but whatever they're
Yeah,
doing
better.
there, I tell them to keep doing it. Well, that's great. But like I said, so we think we're making progress in all this, and now there's all these complaints, but we can't get answers.
But now we have mandated composting, is that correct? So how do I compost if I'm with Waste Management's picking up my stuff?
So
Are they
there's
gonna give me a
two pieces
composting-
there. So for the Food Waste Prevention and Recovery Act only applies to large food waste generators. So that's going to impact large restaurants, grocery stores, hospitals, schools. If you produce a certain amount of food waste, then that's going to apply to you. But that doesn't mean that residents can't participate in composting. There are a lot of options. You can do home composting in your backyard, which with learning a couple tips and tricks, it's actually quite easy to compost at home. Or you can participate in a drop-off program where, just like you would bring your recyclables maybe to your town transfer station, a lot of town transfer stations now are adding that service where people can bring their food scraps somewhere and let someone else do the composting for you. Or there's even, in select areas in the county where certain companies will come and pick up your food scraps at the curb, just like they would pick up your trash or recycling. But that's a limited service. There's only one company, I think, that's doing that right now. So we hope to see that expand. And just to kind of add to some things that Tim was talking about, we really want to be good neighbors, and we want to be perceived as a community asset for our composting program. So anyone who has questions or concerns, or they're not sure about what's going on, we invite you to give us a call, come in for an educational tour, come see for yourself how we're trying to increase recycling, and we have a wonderful process, a wonderful model program at UCRA. People come from all over the state to learn from us how to compost correctly. We had a group from Connecticut just last week. We had groups from China who came, and DEC said you should go visit the
China came over
UCRA,
here?
yes, to visit our program because it's a wonderful community asset.
We're almost out of time, so I just want to touch on this one thing because we would be delinquent if we didn't. You know what that's going to be. But has the agency come up with a policy yet on a lot of companies that are out there refuse to allow inside baseball. They refuse to allow dealing by employees and things of that nature. But you guys didn't seem to have an issue with that, and that's, of course, you're getting all the headlines. You're getting nothing but bad publicity when, in fact, 99%
A lot
of
of
what
bad
you guys
publicity.
do.
And false reporting, but
and the thing is, I mean, we can't live without you, and I applaud everything that you're doing. But I have to tell you, as a cynical son of a gun, I have problems with anybody that's working for you also being one of your customers, because there's just too many places where that can go awry. So are you coming up with a policy, or are you going to do anything to to get the public to be a little more comfortable with what you guys are
I'll
doing?
try to be as quick as
Yeah,
possible.
what happened with that?
Well,
basically.
I can go back to 2007 with regards to employees being customers and all that, because in 2006 the Public Authorities Act came out, and so because of what happened at the Bridge Authority, you couldn't extend credit to board members or employees, right? We actually had employees that had charge accounts when I came in. I'm like, that's got to stop. Our attorney at the time, Steve Wing, who you guys might remember, I had the discussion with him about employees using the facility at all, because I had the same sentiment that you had, right? They shouldn't be doing it. And he explained it to me. He's like, well, I mean, we can't stop people utilizing this facility because where else are they going to go? Think about ShopRite. Can the cashier not buy their groceries from ShopRite? Is that wrong? I'm like, okay. So, and he gave me a legal opinion. He wrote it all out, and that's where we are. The composting thing is interesting to me, and yes, we are. The governance committee is doing what they're supposed to be doing. We had a meeting and they had a discussion. They don't make policy. The committees. That's where you discuss things in a public forum, right? So that the public can hear how you got to your decision. The board ultimately is going to make that decision. So that's why there wasn't a decision at our governance committee meeting, because that's not what the governance committee is supposed to do.
Is there a recommendation?
The recommendation, we hit on all kinds of things because we didn't want to just deal with just the one topic. There's other situations we had to deal with, so that we're drafting a policy. I'm in the middle of actually drafting that policy to bring to the full board to make a decision. But back to the employees using, for me, I find it interesting that we only concentrate on the compost side of things, right? Less than 1% of our budget, when there's also, we had employees with, dump businesses as well. It's like we got to look at the garbage side as well. There's still risk there.
Whenever employees who are running dump operations?
Yes. But that got completely ignored.
That's still in effect?
Yeah,
Well, we know, listen, we know the politics.
Correct.
Okay? We know what's going on. We know there's a lot of publicity to be had, and you guys, everybody, some of these politicians always have to have a foil. In this particular case, you were easy, you were the low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely.
And we completely understand that. All we're suggesting here is that...
Got about a minute, Mario.
Yeah, that there be, something concrete where everybody's playing by the same rules.
Yeah. When you have something like you were saying, a situation like that where the risk is higher of something going awry, you have stronger controls in place.
Exactly.
You can't eliminate risk, but you need to lower it to the furthest extent possible. Those steps we are indeed taking to make sure that happens.
Yeah, because what happens is any negative publicity affects other programs.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And you don't want that. Okay, so anyway, we want to
Thank you for...
2 hours goes quick, doesn't it?
It does go quick, but it was very informative and very interesting. Thank you both.
Thank you so much for having us on the show. And we're at 336-0600 at UCRA. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to contact us.
We'll have you back.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody have a good weekend.